Hello, this is Carl, also known as Zarepath in the custom magic community, and today I wanted to go over some top decks in the custom standard format. So custom standard, as always, is a custom magic format made up of custom cards done by, designers who don't work for Wizards of the Coast. So a lot of fun, different cards. Very fun format. There's going to be a tournament. I think today is the last day to get your list in, and so I wanted to do a real quick video for maybe people wanting to get an idea of the format, what's going on right now, or just looking for a deck. These are some decks that have been very successful recently. So there was a September constructed league, and 3 of these 4 decks performed very well, winning 4 or 5 games or better. And one deck is one that everybody knows is top tier. It just hasn't been played recently for whatever reason. And I'm just going to go over it real briefly and some potential updates you could make to the deck. The first deck that I think is the deck to beat is 4-Color Journey by Agent Blah. And he took this to a 4-1 finish, updated it, took it to a 5-0 finish. And it's just a really strong deck. It uses 4 different colors, obviously, 4-Color Journey. And it uses the format's 5-color lands to facilitate that, including a fun little deck building decision with Genome Lab, which is in the recent set Custom Core 2020. All of his creatures, or most of his creatures, are humans, and so this can become a 5-color land for the purpose of casting humans. And it can still add colorless just for casting other stuff. And then a few basics in case his creatures get hit by Wander the Unknown, which is like a Path to Exile variant. Yeah. And let's take a look at the creatures, because that's really the core of the deck. Well, we've talked about 4 colors. Let's talk about Journey. And it all starts with Eternal Wanderer. It's a 1-drop, and as soon as it enters play, the Journey mechanic kicks in, and that's whenever you journey, you flip the top card of your deck, and you can add that card to your hand whenever you deal combat damage to your opponent. So the fact this comes in on a 1-drop, if you went first, there's a good chance you'll be able to get that card real quick. And Eternal Wanderer's unique ability is that you can keep paying to keep the journey flow going. So if 4-Color Journey can get aggressive and get in before you can stop it, it's able to just create this really aggressive card flow. The other Journey card is Path of Brutality, which is an enchantment. You journey twice, and as long as you have journeyed cards at the beginning of combat, something gets double strike, which can make for very explosive attack, and it also gives you explosive card flow as long as you can get in. So these have synergy with each other. If you have a couple of Paths of Brutality in play at the same time, you can give multiple things double strike. It can get out of hand. So let's look at the other creatures. Barroom Brawler is a new creature from Custom Core 2020. 2/2 trample, usually not enough by itself, but it enters play with this Ale token. And it's not something you have to activate at sorcery speed. You don't have to pay mana to do it. At any time, you can make one of your creatures a little bit stronger. It's interesting how Barroom Brawler curves perfectly into Path of Brutality, because if you play Barroom Brawler on 2, Path of Brutality on 3, you can give your Barroom Brawler double strike. Even if they chump, it has trample, and you can even dome them for even more, for 4 power of damage instead of just 2 if you crack the Ale on the Barroom Brawler. So that's a real brutal curve there as well. Emirabi's Disciple has a nice body. It's a 3/2 for just 2 mana. It has trample. All of this trample makes it really difficult to chump against the deck, just to delay things. And it doesn't double the amount of counters that you get on your stuff, but it adds an additional counter each time you'd add a counter. I haven't shown anything else that adds counters yet, except its own assault ability, which is something that technically you can do. But a lot of times, Agent Blah, when he plays his deck, he's not using the assault to add the counters. He's using this Planeswalker Cypress. Cypress is a 2-mana walker that, you can use the plus to let you cast, the things you need to, which sometimes is necessary in this 4-color deck. But most often he's using it for the 0. For each color, you put counters on a creature of that color. Emirabi's Disciple gets 2 +1/+1 counters because it's 2 different colors. but then Emarabi's Disciple adds an additional counter to each of those, I believe. So I don't know if you get 4 counters on this or just 3. I am not sure. I'll have to check with the rules person, but either way, it's a stupid amount of counters. And then this is your 1-drop a lot of times. So you've got 3 different colors, and this will become a 3/3 if you have Disciple out and Cypress. So a lot of counters. And just a solid aggressive body. Henry is something that gives this deck a lot of resilience against more controlling playstyles, decks that want to use board wipes or spot removal. This makes it more difficult to remove the threats. It also can't be countered itself, so it's naturally good against counterspell decks like Mono Blue Tempo or controlling decks, and it's a 3-of for that reason. And the body is also wonderful as well. 4/3 for 3 with Vigilance. That's a tough beater. This is a new addition to the deck, Jericho's Assistant. It's just a 1-mana 2/1, which is, again, it's a solid body, but this ability makes it even harder to remove the creatures, because if you use target removal, they're going to get a clue anytime you do that. And then Sporeflow Protector, not a human like the others, or Barroom Brawler, but this ability to exile 2 cards from a graveyard to Germinate is amazing. Germinate, ability from Erelu, anytime you Germinate, you either put a counter on any of your creatures, or you create a 1/1 Saproling token. So this can help you go wide. This can create counters to, get doubled by Emarabi's Disciple. And it can also just incidentally hurt a lot of graveyard-based strategies in the format. So because of Sporeflow Protector, reanimation decks have a hard time, or just graveyard value decks, or the Unearth combo deck that came in with Custom Core 2020. It's just very difficult to deal with a Sporeflow Protector. And a lot of times, if your board's been wiped and you top deck this, you're right back in the game, because with all of your mana and all the stuff in yards, you can pay 2 for this and then just play out a bunch of tokens. So it's a very strong creature. So that's the creature suite. Instance, Hired Hit is just a 1-mana lightning bolt. You do have to upload a card from your hand, which is a mechanic where you can pay 2 mana to put uploaded cards back in your hand. So kind of a delayed kicker. And then Tuahanga's Choice, which is a green charm, which has been surprisingly good, particularly in this list. We talked about the incidental trample that's here. Tuahanga's Choice also grants trample along with its giant growth mode. And it also has one-sided fight, but also towards planeswalkers. So this is really good at eliminating planeswalkers and creatures, and of course, enchantments. So if they're using Oblivion Rings, or they have some kind of synergy build based around specific enchantments, Tuahanga's Choice kind of gives you a good game against that. And then Amaret, who I think is one of the strongest cards in the format, a good reason to be in red and white, or to splash for the 4th color. You can come down with this on turn 4, deal 3 damage to one of their creatures, gain 3 life, still have a planeswalker left over. You can +1 Amaret turn after turn until they naturally become a 5/5 flying indestructible angel. What I've seen in practice is a lot of times that just opens it up to being hit by Wander the Unknown. Again, that Path to Exile variant I mentioned. So people will tick up to 6, and then they'll minus Amaret down again, just to deal damage to face, or to clean up something off the board and gain some life. So yeah, that's the deck. Very resilient. All the threats are kind of terrifying. Everything feels like a must remove. And the synergies can make it snowball out of control. This is a very resilient, powerful deck. I think it's the deck to beat right now. I don't think it's impossible to beat. I just think people need to tune for it somehow. And that's a topic for another video, but this is a deck everyone needs to be aware of. I said that I had 4 decks that I think are top tier. So we did 4 Color Journey. Let's talk about Mono Blue Tempo. Mono Blue Tempo is the deck I mentioned that no one really played in the September Constructed League, but is a very rigorous, excellent deck. It's won several tournaments in the past, previous iterations. This is a version that hasn't been updated with Custom Core 2020 because no one's played it with Custom Core 2020 yet. You'll notice down here it only has 20 lands. It's a very low to the ground, aggressive deck that really wants to deploy threats on turn 1 and then hold up counter spells to protect them and interact with cheap interactive tools that it has. It also uses the Civilized mechanic on a couple cards. And Civilized cares if you have a creature, an artifact, and enchantment. I'll go over how they achieve that. But the bonuses for that are here on Namazar's Disciple. It's a 2/1 flyer, which is okay, but the fact it gets bigger every turn is a really great game plan for a tempo deck, because this will get bigger every turn while you natively just hold up counter spells to protect it or keep them off of sweepers and spot removal. So that's one bonus for Civilized. The other is Consult the Scriptures, which just becomes counterspell. And then Imperial Achievement, which normally is just a kind of a mediocre cantrip, but doubles in value as soon as you have Civilized, which gives you a ton of card advantage. Yeah. Now, where are they getting the creatures, artifacts, and enchantments? Well, they have 12 creatures here, but they also have 4 creature tokens from Rhonidophobia, which is a curse from Erelu, which curses your opponent while also making a frog, an unblockable frog for yourself. And then we also have Breaker of Cities, which can become a creature as needed if you activate the crew for it. The artifacts, we have the 4 Breaker of Cities. This is another tempo tool that can kind of snowball with the protection from your counter spells and end the game fairly quickly as you build up this very wide board and you have this trampling threat. And then Rod of Marble Row is a really excellent piece of interaction. It's just you bounce them for 1 mana, so like a slow unsummon, but it stays as an artifact for the purposes of Civilized, and you can equip your creatures to make them a little bit bigger to get over any potential blockers or just to deal the extra damage you need to finish out the game. Enchantments, we took a look at Rhonidophobia, which doubles as a creature, and then Cryocell, which is another piece of 1 mana creature removal. It taps the creature, they can't untap until they pay 4 mana. And note that when they pay the 4 mana, it not only destroys Cryocell, but it also untaps them at instant speed. So be aware when they have 4 mana up and you've Cryocelled something, that's the play that they might be able to make. Okay, we talked about, Creature Suite, we talked about Breaker of Cities, Rhonidophobia, 1 mana unblockable. Eternal Wanderer is, we mentioned it in the 4-color Journey deck. It's a big part of this deck as well. Being able to get that card flow going early, being able to hit your land drops even though you just have 20 of them is really important. Flutter Droid is another artifact that's also a creature, and we have so many other artifacts in the deck with Breaker of Cities, Rod of Marble Row, the other Flutter Droids, that oftentimes this is triggering and becoming a 2/2 flyer on your turn. Namazar's Disciple we talked about already. And then the last counterspell we haven't talked about is Disrupting Current. It's just mana leak, but it requires a little bit of color commitment, which this deck does have. Another bonus of being a monocolored deck is you can afford to run these 4 Coral Barons, which require you to have 3 or more basic lands. Even though we only have 20 lands, it's fairly often that you get up to 4, and you can keep them off of Sweeper mana, or you can keep them off Amaret mana, or just disrupt them a little bit using your lands as you keep attacking in with your evasive threats. Now, here in the sideboard, this isn't the real sideboard. These are cards that I suspect would be good in the deck somehow. I haven't played Mono Blue Tempo, and as I was talking with Plipster about the deck and what kind of changes they might make to include these things, Plipster being the person who I think has piloted this deck to the best finishes, either Plipster or Gataxian, I'm not sure which, probably both. It was unclear what you take out to put these things in. There's some argument that because of Henry in the 4-color Journey deck, counterspells aren't as good, and maybe you remove counterspells to put in these threats. I think this deck really likes having the counterspells. If it were me, This is what I would try, and I might be wrong. Like being able to draw 2 cards for 1 mana seems really good. But I'd take those out because they don't in and of themselves further the game plan. They just keep the flow going. And you already have Eternal Wanderer to do that, and we'd be adding Avian Assistance that would do that. So Avian Assistance being another enchantment, so that'll help your civilized count, that creates another evasive creature as it enters play. So creature and an enchantment, that's good. And it allows you to draw a card the same turn you play it and later turns as well, as long as you've been attacking, which with these unblockable creature tokens and creatures with flying is not that hard to accomplish. The thing that knocks it here is it costs 3 mana, and that would make it immediately the most expensive thing in the whole deck, apart from Consult the Scriptures, which we're often casting for 2 anyway, and that might strain the 20 land mana base. And then the other thing that might be good to add is this 1 mana 1/2 can't be blocked when it enters play, scry 1. That's a very pushed 1-drop for blue. It's evasive, it helps you get the thing on top of your deck that you want. It can even block well if you need it to against tokens, or can even trade with some 2-drops. So I wanted to try it, so put in 3 Vat-Grown Assailants, take out a couple Cryo Cells. The idea here being sometimes Cryo Cell is just dead. Like their creature they use for the utility, like it's an Eternal Wanderer, and it being tapped doesn't help that much. Rod of Marble Row I think is much better than Cryo Cell. And sometimes they will blow you out with it if you forget about the destruction clause. So this would be a potentially updated variant. You might be better served not even adding those cards in and maybe keeping them in the side if there's a reason to have them come in certain matchups. But this deck has historically been really good, very difficult to deal with. It has a lot of disruption. It has a great card flow. Yeah. I don't know how this deck fares against 4-Color Journey. It's not a matchup that I think has been played very often. So that's the second of the 4. Yeah, we're going to discard our changes there. The third is Mono Red Stompy. This is very similar to the deck I did a deck tech on a few weeks ago. Zoo took that list and he improved it. I mean, it must be an improvement because I went 2-3, I think, with my version, and he went 5-0 with this one. One of the main changes, if you're familiar with the deck, is he got rid of the janky haste-granting rituals and just added more creatures. So I was thinking adding more shocks, like some of that interaction, and he also added a few more lands. So instead of 22, 23 lands, he has 24, and 3 Draconic Crevice for that reach after your board's been wiped. Barbarian Brawler we've talked about. One thing I didn't mention before is in multiples they get even more crazy because when you play the second one they both trigger, and so you'll go from 1 ale to 3 real quick. And of course it has the great synergy with Path of Brutality. Another 2-drop that has good synergy with Path of Brutality, although perhaps not the same amount as Barbarian Brawler, is Hunter Seeker, which has Menace, so it's difficult to chump. And the first time it deals combat damage, it gets bigger. And so then on the second strike, from having double strike, you'll get another arm trigger. And by the end of the turn, it'll be a 4/3 menace with a couple arm tokens. And even then, if it's removed, you can distribute those weapon tokens among your other creatures. So another great 2-drop for an aggressive deck. Kanan War Driver. Excellent 1-drop, 2/1 for 1. Can't go wrong there. No downsides, and it can occasionally grant haste to your creatures. You notice this, that doesn't help that much for these things or that. But for something like Antarachi Apex, which is a 6/5 flyer for 4, giving that thing haste can be very explosive, particularly if your Path of Brutality is in play and can grant it double strike, or if you have a Barbarian Brawler in play and you can give it an ale, or perhaps all 3, right? You've got this hasty flying double striking 8/5 dragon, which is very magical Christmas land, but all of the individual components combine synergistically just with each other component. You don't need the whole machine thrumming perfectly. Other 1-drop, make a Fire Stoker, really good at just coming in and being that third creature to trigger Prestige, where you need 3 or more attacking creatures. So a 2/2 haste for 1 is good a lot of the time. Not perfect on turn 1, but that's okay. It'll eventually become a 2/2 if things go according to plan. Remnant of Eruptions. The fact that this is a 1/1 that deals damage to their face as soon as you play it is pretty good. And then if you chump with it or it gets killed when you're attacking with all your stuff, you can bring it back later and it will have haste then, which again is helpful for triggering Prestige. Yeah. And then the other thing that is a bonus for Prestige is Unproven Hatchling. It's been a fantastic creature for red decks in Custom Standard ever since it came around. And it's not great as a 2/2 for 2, but if you plan on attacking with 3 or more creatures with great consistency, as this deck is built to, it's an excellent creature, 4/4 flying, evasive threat that you can even dump mana into. Tempered Inculum has some reach in aggro matchups. You can gain you some life to stabilize if you're in that situation. And this is another good target to give haste to with Canaan War Driver, or Double Strike to with Path of Brutality. And it can't be forgotten that Path of Brutality helps give this deck some card flow, which red decks typically don't get. But Divination plus Double Strike is well worth it in a deck like this. And then their sideboard, you tune accordingly to what you expect. But yeah, this deck has done really well. It's almost all creatures, so lots of threats, lots of haste, lots of evasion, some big size, some power pumping, and Path of Brutality. So a pretty straightforward deck, but a lot of cool synergies. It's fun to pilot in my experience, and I would expect this deck to be in the tournament, and I'd expect it to do fairly well, honestly. I think it could have game against 4-Color Journey. 4-Color Journey, I don't know how well it defends. And if it's on the draw against this deck, they desperately need to find their removal, or else I think they just lose. And then the last of the 4 decks I wanted to talk about is a combo deck. It's Naya Harmonized Together. It was originally put together by CFT Sock, and this version was put together by Ruben, where he added not even stuff from Custom Core 2020, I don't think. Just some tech that, it hadn't been in the deck yet. It hadn't been discovered yet. But the idea of this deck is it's a combo deck using the Harmony mechanic. And not even just a combo deck, it can also just be a go-wide aggro deck. Harmony, anytime you harmonize, you can pick any Harmony ability among your creatures and trigger it. And so you'll notice here, Soul of New Allures has 2 different Harmony abilities. One makes it a vehicle, a creature, artifact creature vehicle, which is never used. It's typically, you're just putting counters on your stuff. And you can tap 2 creatures to do that at any time. And note that they don't have to be free of summoning sickness. You can tap creatures you've created the same turn. Well, where are you getting all these creatures? They come from this kind of cool enchantment combo between Travel Together and Protect the Farm. Travel Together is an enchantment from Vestum, which can come down early when you're not doing other stuff, and it just kind of doubles your token creation. And then Protect the Farm gives you token anytime you play a land. Between these 2 things, you can make 2 tokens a turn. They can board wipe every turn if they want, and you're still building a board naturally. And then later in the game, if you get enough mana, you can win the game just with the tokens created off those lands. So this is a really potent package. Then you combine that with something like Soul of New Allures, and those tokens can become huge at instant speed. They think they're going to board wipe you, and you make them big. Or they think that you're just chumping, but all of a sudden they can become enormous. And note that both of the token types, the Soldier with Vigilance, the Nomad with Vigilance, they can attack and then harmonize to make themselves bigger in the middle of combat, which is devastating if you're not prepared for it. So that's obviously very potent harmonize ability, but there's others. This one has the Germinate mechanic I mentioned before with Spore Flow Protector. And here in this case, you're almost always making the creature token. because you already have 2 +1/+1 counters instead of 1 off of this harmonize. And it actually creates infinite tokens that are infinitely large if you combine Travel Together, Woo Pip Chef, and Soul of New Allures. Because if you choose to make 1 token, Travel Together will make it 2 tokens. Then you can tap them both to harmonize, and the harmonize that you choose is this one to create a Sapperling, which creates another Nomad. You have 2 untapped creatures, you tap them to harmonize, and so on and so forth. And that will just win a game most of the time. But a lot of games, you're not assembling the combo, you're threatening the combo and just creating value off of harmony and its synergies. So we also have a harmony ability that bolts things. This can stabilize you real quick. It can eliminate a lot of their board. Festival Songstress is just like an additional Woo Pip Chef. You're not often paying the 4 to create the bird. You're just having this out here so that you have access to the Harmonize trigger to go with Travel Together and Soul. Plume de Valsinger helps you be aggressive with your tokens and kind of throw their weight around. Giving all your creatures +1/+0 and vigilance is really good, particularly when you can tap them mid-combat with their vigilance to do it again. Rejoicing Aristocrats is just kind of a toolbox feature here for eliminating Oblivion Rings or, the various artifacts and enchantments of the format. We talked about Sporeflow Protector before. It's just a nice one-of for the deck. It's a strong creature. You can't fault them for having it. And then Uncanny Woodghast is a very interesting mana dork. Very interesting mana dork in that you can tap it just for the mana abilities of the lands you control, or you can tap it to use a fetch land ability of a land you control. So like if they're attacking with something big, you can chump with the Woodghast and then crack it to find a forest or plains, and it's like you're not down the mana from your mana dork anyway, and you got to chump with it. So really cool there. But a really important land in this deck is Art Studio, and this is the final, well, it's not the final, but it's a really potent Harmonize source because it's just in your lands. It's not taking up card slots. You don't have to cast it. And it's repeatable. You can do it once a turn. You can just keep making Sapperling creatures, or you can threaten a counter on one of your attacking creatures at instant speed. Well, if you also have Woodghast out, you can threaten 2 of it, right? You can use a Forest and Art Studio and then a Woodghast and a Plains or whatever to germinate twice, or to deal 6 damage to their face, or whatever Harmonize ability you want to use. Then here in the instance, we have this pair of Harmonized instance. This one is either a Lightning Strike to a creature, so you can't go to the dome with this, or you can Harmonize twice. And I've gone over all the cool Harmonize things you can do. Harmonizing twice is really powerful. Beautiful Crescendo is the 4 of, though. And even though it doesn't interact with the board, it can be used to find a card with Harmony. So we talked about this combo with Travel Together, Woo Pip Chef, and Soul of New Allures. That can help you assemble 2 of those 3 pieces. Or you can use it to hit a land drop, because remember the Art Studio is a land and it has Harmony. Yeah, so it's just a really good toolbox card, and there's a lot of cool things in your toolbox. This is a deck that's been really good in other formats and has only gotten better, I think. It's very difficult to play because of, you have these 4 instant speed tutors, and anytime you play any of these cards, you get to choose between a whole bunch of different effects to trigger. And sometimes you'll have the win and maybe not even realize it. So definitely a high skill ceiling deck, but definitely a very powerful and explosive deck. The last thing is Amaret. I mentioned it before. It's just nice to have Amaret in your colors because against aggro, you can, stabilize. You can even finish off a game by going face with the -X, or just creating even more tokens. And look, these tokens also go really well with Soul of New Allures and Plume de Valsinger, and just the general token strategy that's going on with Travel Together as well. So that's it. That was a look at what I think are the proven top 4 decks of the format. And for review, those were 4-Color Journey. Yeah. And Mono Blue Tempo. There's arguments that a blue-red version that has Barroom Brawler and Path of Brutality could be better, and I could see that. I'm interested to see if somebody tries that in the next tournament. I might try it. I don't know what I'm bringing yet. Mono Red Stompy. Just great curving out aggressive deck with a lot of power and speed. And then Naya Harmonized Together, a token deck that also has a potential combo finish. Those are the top 4 decks. You kind of have an array of deck types. You've got a combo deck. You have some aggro tempo decks. 4-Color Journey is not quite a mid-range deck, but in some ways it is. But there's no real control deck, and the reason for that, I think, is it just hasn't been built yet. It's very difficult to build control decks that are tuned to the meta. The meta is a little unsettled right now with the new set that's in. This is going to be the first new tournament. I'm curious to see if someone brings control. I think board wipes could be really good against the field if we see a lot of these kinds of decks that are very creature heavy. But then you have stuff like Henry that delays board wipes. And cards like Eternal Wanderer that give eventual card advantage, even when it's removed. But I think there's a good control deck out there. I have a build that maybe I'll do another video about if it turns out to be good. But if I were to submit a deck to the tournament, I would be prepared to face these decks. I'd expect to see them, or I'd be piloting them, or I'd have a deck tuned to beat them. And hopefully this gives you guys a good idea of what's really strong right now in the format. Of course, if you're interested in more fun, casual builds like janky combo decks, tribal decks that have some game to them but maybe aren't as proven yet, you can still totally bring those. Those are still lots of fun. You don't expect these kinds of decks every single game. And it's fun to take those unproven decks and tune those as well. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, this walk through the format, and I hope to see you guys at the tournament. Thanks for watching.